Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy, retired Justice of the New York State Supreme Court. I'm thinking about law school admissions, which are rising rapidly in this post-COVID age, and it brings me back into thinking about my own experience in being admitted to law school back in September of 1966. I was one of 1,500 applicants to St. John's Law School in Queens, and I then became one of 150 eligible for the freshman class and entered law school in September 1966 with 150 classmates, all of whom they throw in a big lecture hall with one lecturer. And it's a very good money-making proposition for the law school because they don't invest in a lot of equipment or anything else, and they're getting graduate school tuitions from 150 students. The problem is they only graduate 75, but between the first year and the last year when they graduate 75 students, there's a lot of story going on, and that's what this is all about. I studied for the first time in my life and was doing very, very well because I really liked what I was studying. I had 4 courses: criminal law, contracts were the big ones, torts, which is all about civil wrongs, and introduction to civil procedure. And at the end of the semester, you get one exam, and the exam is a long proposition. It's just a final. Nobody tells you what to expect on the final or how you should handle the final. You go into the final with the only test you've had all semester, and probably 60 to 65 or 70% of the final is actually composed of essay questions, which are pretty subjective when you think about it. Long story short, I took the test, and my friends, 4 of whom were college classmates of mine in undergraduate St. John's University, all thought I was destined to be an honor student and make the law review. They would call me up late at night and say, "What's going on with this? Do you understand this or that?" And I don't get it, and I don't get the concept, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was right on it, and I really liked it, and I really enjoyed it and absorbed it. And I was explaining to my friends, and they all predicted I was going to be on the honor roll, which is law review in law school. Well, right after the holidays and right into the new year, January 67, I got my letter from St. John's with my grades and a notice saying I had flunked out. Now, they didn't put it in those words. They used euphemisms. I was academically disqualified or some kind of hocus pocus, but I was flunked out of law school. It was a shock. I'm a pretty strong person, and I've been through all sorts of stuff, even at that stage of my life, and I can be pretty resilient when I have to be. But this knocked me for a loop. The night I got that letter, I was in bed. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I started crying. I had a nervous breakdown. I was crying and shaking, and I actually saw my spirit, my soul, walking out of the room. It was sort of like an out-of-body experience. It was very weird. Luckily, my mother, who could hear the grass growing, woke up when she heard my sobbing, as it were, came running into the room and said, "What's going on? What's the matter?" and put the brakes on. She said, "Listen, hold on a second. I know you feel terrible. Tomorrow's another day. We'll go see people. We'll do this. We'll do that. We can do something. We'll work our way through it, and we'll fight it, and we'll get this thing straightened out somehow or other." And that simple act of encouragement and support stopped the progress of what I thought was, in retrospect, I still think was the onset of a nervous breakdown. So we went, just as my mother said, and we started making contact with different people. One of them was the gentleman called Saul Fromkes, who built the library at St. John's Law School. He intervened on my behalf, and he couldn't get me back in. Another one was a judge on the highest court of the state of New York, Judge John Scalepi, who was a personal friend of my mother. He belonged to my mother's political club in Flushing. And when I went to see Judge Scalepi, he was very, very solicitous and very kind. And he said, I can't help you out, Rudy. He said, my own son was flunked out of St. John's Law School. And right now, in 1967, he's in Vietnam flying a helicopter. That's how much influence I had on the subject, he said. So I don't know what to do. The other person I went to see was the Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, the head of the criminal division in charge of all criminal prosecutions in Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau, Suffolk, and some of the southern counties of upstate New York. His name was Vincent McCarthy, a perfect gentleman and a very dear guy. And he tried to help me. He had then, back in 1967, a special typewriter in his office which would retype originals, as many as you wanted. So you put one original in there as a stereotype, as it were, and it would make as many copies as you wanted. And we tried about 150 copies, and we sent them to every different law school in the country seeking admissions. I tried Southern schools, Western schools, traditional black Negro, what they call the Negro colleges, the historic Negro colleges, female schools. I tried everything. I would have done anything to get back into law school, and I didn't particularly care about the school, but I couldn't do it. Vincent McCarthy told me about Rule 5 of the Court of Appeals, the state of New York, the rule governing the admission of attorneys to the bar. And he said, there's a possibility you can be a law clerk and study law in a law office and then take the bar exam under certain conditions. He said, you have to keep that in consideration. I said, well, I keep that in the back of my mind, but I'm going to try one more law school. I was so disappointed by getting all these rejections from all these law schools. And in years past, prior to that time in 1966, if you flunked out of a law school that was a pretty good law school, you could probably get into a school of a lesser reputation. But that had all changed. Vietnam was going on, and people were crowding the schools. They were draft deferred, so there was a big press, and the schools were in demand, and they had the upper hand. So I was getting rejection after rejection after rejection, and a friend told me about Portia Law School up in Boston. Portia Law School had been a woman's only law school, named after Caesar's wife, who I think was a senator or in ancient Rome, or a lawyer of some sort. And it was an all-female law school for a while, and then they had changed, and they went to admitting males and females as well. And the story with Portia Law School was that it was locally accredited in the state of Massachusetts, which means if you graduated Portia Law School, you could take the Massachusetts bar, but not any other state bar. To be graduated from a law school that allowed you to take any other state bar, you had to be in an accredited law school, which was accredited by the American Bar Association. So I heard that Portia Law School was under consideration, was basically on probation. They had applied for accreditation, national accreditation from the American Bar Association. And I thought if I got in there under this present circumstances at this time, I could ride that wave of accreditation and then get a degree years later from a fully accredited law school, Portia Law School, which would enable me to take the New York bar, because if I went to any other locally accredited school, I couldn't take the New York bar unless I practiced in that state, in this case Massachusetts, for 5 years. And then they would consider my application to be basically sort of a transferee to the New York bar. So I tried to get into Portia Law School. And I decided to fly up there. I took the shuttle on a very cold February morning from LaGuardia Airport, and I ended up in Logan Airport in Boston. And I took the cheapest means available. It was a cloudy, miserable day, just as it was in New York, an overcast and damp and dank day. And I took the cheapest transportation possible into town from Logan Airport. And I found my way to Beacon Hill, went up the hill, and there's this little Portia Law School in what looks like a very, very nice old-fashioned brownstone. And Beacon Hill's a nice fancy neighborhood, and it fit right in, sort of like Brooklyn Heights in New York. I opened the door, walked in, and I was faced immediately with a desk, and behind the desk was a young lady who was sort of a receptionist and secretary. She said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "I'm up here. I'd like to see Dean Kozak." I knew the dean's name. I think he was a retired Air Force major, I found out. And I said, "I'd like to see Dean Kozak. I'm up from New York, and I want to talk to him about being admitted to Portia Law School. And I just came up. Is there any chance I could see him? I don't have an appointment." She says, "Well," she waved her hand in the wait right there motion, and she got up from her chair, and I got the signal, and I waited. And she walked right behind her desk through an open door into an office. And in that office was what turned out to be Dean Kozak. It was his office. And she explained to him, and I could see him basically in and out of the distance. And she explained, she said, "There's a young man out there who wants to talk to you, Dean, about being admitted to Portia Law School." And he said, and I could hear, he was right within earshot, and I heard every word of the conversation. He said, "Well, I'm leaving right now. I have a luncheon to attend. I got to go home and put on a tuxedo. It's a formal affair, and I have to speak. I don't have any time right now. I'm actually running a little bit late. Tell that young man I'd be happy to see him. Make an appointment for him to come back on Monday. And anytime, you know my schedule. Fit me in, fit him in, and I'll be happy to talk to him." Okay? And he promptly left from another entrance, and I saw him going out the door. But out of courtesy to the young lady, I waited to hear what I already knew she was going to say, which was, "Come back Monday, and the dean will see you." I said, "Thank you, appreciate it." And I went out into the street to try to catch up with the dean. The dean, it turns out, had entered his car, which was parked right nearby, and pulled out just as I got near his car. I followed the car, and it started to snow. This was like a bad movie, like a B movie. And I caught up with him at the next traffic light where he was stopped, and as soon as I got to the back of his car, the light turned green and he pulled ahead, and this went on for 5 blocks. So now I'm huffing and puffing in the snow, chasing this guy in his car until thankfully he stopped and pulled over. But he didn't know I was there. He stopped to pull over. He was ahead of me at this time, got out of the car, and he walked into what was a small grocery store or delicatessen to get something or other. And I waited for him at the doorway, at the exit of that store. And when he came out, and there I am soaking wet from the snow and huffing and puffing and sweating, and then I said, and out of breath, and I said, "Dean Kozak," I said, I'm the guy that just requested the appointment to see you about admissions, and you told the young lady to come back on Monday." He says, "Yes, right. No problem." I said, No, it's a problem because I just came up from New York on the shuttle, and I have a return trip to go home tonight, and I only have $7 in my pocket, and I can't come back on Monday. I don't have the money for it or anything else. Is there any way you could see me today? Anytime. I'll just wait. I'll take the latest shuttle I could, or anything I could." He said, okay, slow down. He said, "I'll tell you what, I have to go to a dinner. I'm going home. I live nearby. I'm going to change into my tuxedo. I'll be back at my office, and I'll meet you there in a half hour. And all I can give you is 5 minutes. I'm on a very tight schedule." I said, "Don't worry, that's great. That's all I need, and that's all we'll need." He said, "Okay, I'll see you back at the office. Go right back, walk back to school, and wait in the waiting room, and I'll be there to see you in a half hour." Sure enough, a half hour later, he comes back, and he said, "Come on in." And I introduced myself, and he introduced himself. And I told him quickly what was going on. I wanted to get into school. I had been bounced out of St. John's unceremoniously. I didn't even know what hit me. I said I passed criminal law, and I passed contracts, which are 2 hardest courses. I failed the torts by 1 point. I got a 64. And 65 was passing, and most of the test was essay questions. And I said the introduction to civil procedure was the same thing, similar, but I got a 63. I failed by 2 points, and I was unceremoniously kicked out of St. John's. And I want to be a lawyer, and I know I can do it, and I would like to come to Portia and get a second chance. He said, "Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but over my vote, because I voted no, our board of directors of Portia Law School voted to apply for accreditation to the American Bar Association and become nationally accredited. And I didn't want to do it because just for the reason that I'm talking to you right now, we lose our independence. He said, a guy like you who just came up and went through just what you went through just to even see me, he said, obviously wants to become a lawyer and should become a lawyer. You know, you've got the desire, and that's the big secret ingredient. He said, and I can't let you into school because we're on probation with the American Bar Association. And the rule for transferees from one school to another among American Bar Association accredited schools is very simple. To transfer from one school to another that's accredited, you have to be in good standing with the one you left. Good academic standing. He said, and you're not, because they academically expelled you. And that means, in plain language, you're blackballed, because you'll never get into any other American Bar Association accredited school because of that rule. And for all intents and purposes, it's a blackball. He said, and that's what you're up against. Well, as bad as that news was, I was relieved in a sense to get it, because now I knew what I was up against. And I knew the absolute truth. I was getting all these euphemistic letters, oh, our school, this and that, and this school, this and that. But they were all turn downs. And nobody ever told me the real truth. The real truth of the matter was they were all ABA accredited schools. And they were not going to let me in because they were following that rule, which is what Dean Kozak had called it in his gentlemanly way, was a blackball. And from that day on, I knew what I was up against. And subsequently, after any number of trials and tribulations, I tried to become a Marine. I tried to become a Marine officer. I tried to become a New York City police officer. I taught 3 years in the South Bronx, Fort Apache. When it became Fort Apache, I ended up clerking in a law office for 3.5 years, 3 different law offices with different kinds of practice. I took the bar review course 7 times as a cram course because that was my formal education, and I needed that knowledge to pass that bar exam. And I ultimately became a lawyer, but that's the stuff of another story. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, Lessons They Don't Teach in Law School. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.